Have you ever woken up on a completely normal day and simply couldn't get started? It wasn't physical exhaustion. You slept. The alarm went off. The coffee was brewed. But there was something, an invisible, heavy, nameless weight, holding you there, motionless, staring at the ceiling as if the entire day had already defeated you before it even began. And the strange part is, you don't even know why. You have projects, you have dreams, you have important things to do. But instead of taking action, you scroll through your phone. You switch tabs. You watch one more video. You postpone, yet again, that task that was already pushed back last week, and the week before, and last month. And deep down, way down, a voice whispers, I could be much further along than I am right now. Does that bother you yet? Have you ever looked at your own life and felt that nagging sensation that time is moving faster than you are growing? I've realized that the greatest threat to your life might not be an external tragedy, but something silent, living inside you, disguised as rest, hiding behind fatigue, speaking with your own voice. This enemy has an ancient name. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how it operates, how it seeps into your habits, occupies your days, and slowly destroys what you were meant to build. But more than that, I'm going to show you a real method, based on a teaching over 2,000 years old that is still the most precise tool I've found on this subject. You'll leave here with a practical strategy that can change your very next day. Because the problem isn't that you're weak. The problem is that no one ever properly explained what's happening to you. And once you understand it, everything will click in a way that will surprise you. But before we get there, I need to tell you a story. His name was James, 34 years old, living in Detroit, working as an analyst for a mid-sized company. On the outside, everything looked fine. Stable job, decent apartment, a few friends, a routine that worked, or at least seemed to. But James lived in a state he couldn't quite describe to anyone. Every morning he woke up with a mental to-do list. He was going to finish that online course that had been sitting idle for 6 months. He was going to call the friend he'd been ghosting for weeks. He was going to sit down and finally write out the project that lived in his head like a cloud that never rained. And every night, he lay down with that same list. Untouched. What happened in between? Nothing major. Just life. A lunch break that ran long, the Netflix series he promised he'd only watch one episode of. The phone he picked up just to check one thing and put down 3 hours later with dry eyes. James wasn't lazy in the classic sense. He didn't stay in bed all day. He went to work, answered emails, did the basics, but there was a painful gap between what he was doing and what he knew he was capable of. And that gap hurt. Over time, he learned how not to think about it. He developed a silent skill for looking away from his own dreams. Every time a new idea sparked, it was followed by a voice, you'll start and you won't finish. Why bother? And James believed that voice, until the day he ran into his old history teacher by chance at a grocery store on a random Wednesday afternoon. The professor was a simple man, with glasses and a measured way of speaking. They chatted for 2 minutes, and in the middle of the conversation, without James saying a word about his struggles, the professor looked at him with a strange calm and said, James, I remember you in class. You were the student who asked the most questions. What happened to that boy? It was a simple question, almost silly, but James just stood there, hand on his grocery cart, unable to answer. He went home different that night, not with a solution, not with a plan, but with a small crack in the armor he had built around his dreams, a fissure, an opening. Something inside him knew there was a way out. He just didn't know how yet. That is exactly where the teaching I want to show you comes in. There's a Greek word that early thinkers used to describe a state of the soul that goes far beyond what we call laziness. The word is acedia, and it doesn't just mean not wanting to do things. It describes a state of spiritual numbness, a gradual drifting away from everything that has meaning, an anesthesia of the soul that sets in when a human being stops fighting for what they believe in. Medieval monks called acedia the noonday demon, that moment when the sun is at its peak, the day is half over, and suddenly everything feels empty, meaningless, and worthless. Sound familiar? There is a powerful metaphor for this, a fig tree planted in a garden. The owner of the garden waits for fruit. 1 year, 2, 3. The tree is standing there, looking healthy, taking up space, but producing nothing. And the owner says, cut it down. Why should it waste the soil? An untended garden becomes a thicket of weeds. A life without cultivation becomes numbness. That is the image I want you to carry. The garden without a master. It's not a destroyed garden. It's not a burned garden. It's a garden that simply stopped being cared for. And that's exactly why it's more terrifying. Because the decay is slow, silent, and almost imperceptible. Every day you don't cultivate your life with intention is a day the weeds grow another inch. Now, look at how this resonates with other traditions. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor-philosopher, wrote in his Meditations, do not waste the remainder of thy life in thoughts about others. Look within. Within is the fountain of good. Stoicism recognizes that the greatest enemy of a human being is internal dispersion, that state where energy exists, but it dissolves into 1,000 possibilities before producing anything. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, identified something he called the existential vacuum, a state of profound boredom and lack of meaning that, according to him, was just as dangerous as physical suffering. But at the heart of this isn't just a lack of discipline, it's a disconnection. When you lose touch with what gives your life meaning, whether it's a purpose, a faith, or a mission, laziness isn't the cause, it's the symptom. It's the symptom of a soul that has stopped feeding itself. Think of 3 concrete situations. The person who goes to bed exhausted every day without having done anything significant, not because they lacked energy, but because they never directed that energy towards something that actually matters to them. The student who fails the exam again because the material feels meaningless, not because they aren't smart, but because they lost the connection to why they are studying. The professional who drags projects on for months without finishing any, not because they are incompetent, but because their internal garden has become a thicket and they no longer know where to start cutting. In all these cases, the problem doesn't start with the action. It starts with the disconnection. And that's why no productivity method works for long without this foundation. You can install every app in the world. You can make all the lists. You can wake up at 5 a.m. But if the garden has no master, the weeds come back. The issue isn't doing more, it's reconnecting with the why. Now, let me show you how to turn this teaching into something you can apply tomorrow morning. I call this the gardener's protocol. It consists of 4 simple steps. Each takes less than 2 minutes. Together, they won't make you a different person overnight, but they will start pulling the weeds 1 root at a time. Step 1, name the garden. Every day before you start anything, write 1 single sentence that answers this question. What am I cultivating today? It's not a to-do list. It's an intention. It could be, today I am cultivating discipline, or today I am cultivating presence with my family, or simply, today I am cultivating clarity. Fruit starts at the root, not the branches. Naming the garden is caring for the root. Step 2, identify the weeds. Ask yourself, what behavior has been stealing my energy most this week? Be honest, not with judgment, with diagnosis. A gardener doesn't hate the weeds. He simply identifies them so he can act. Maybe it's your phone. Maybe it's a toxic conversation you keep replaying. Maybe it's the habit of starting 1,000 things and finishing none. Name 1, just 1. Step 3, make the first cut. This is the only step that requires physical action. Pick 1 task you've been avoiding and do the first 5 minutes of it. Just 5 minutes. You don't have to finish. It doesn't have to be perfect. Neuroscience calls this the Zeigarnik effect. Tasks that are started create a cognitive tension that naturally pulls you to complete them. Faithfulness in small things opens space for the big things. The first cut is always the hardest. Step 4, close the garden with gratitude. At the end of the day, write down, or just think of 1 thing you cultivated. Not what you failed to do, what you cultivated. The step seems simple, but it reprograms the mental pattern that feeds acedia. Instead of ending the day with a list of what was missing, you end with the recognition of what grew, no matter how small. A garden without a master forms when the master stops showing up. The gardener's protocol is simply the act of showing up, every day, for a few minutes with intention. That is enough to start changing everything. Remember that feeling I described at the beginning? That invisible weight? That inability to get started? That voice saying, I could be much further along than I am right now. You now know where that voice comes from. It doesn't come from your weakness. It comes from a garden that was left without a master for too long. It comes from the disconnection between who you are and what you do with your days. And the good news is that gardens can be restored, not all at once, not with 1 grand, heroic gesture, but day after day, with presence, with intention, using the 4 simple steps you just learned. James, the man standing in the grocery store with his cart, unable to answer what happened to the boy who asked questions, didn't need a dramatic turnaround. He needed a crack, an opening, a first cut at the weeds, and that's what that conversation gave him. Now you have more than a crack. You have a method. You have a teaching that has survived 2,000 years because it touches something true in human nature. But I have to be honest with you. None of the words I've said here will change anything in your life if you don't show up for your own garden tomorrow morning. Transformation doesn't live in the video. It lives in the choice you make when the alarm goes off, when the laziness whispers, when the phone glows before you do the first thing that matters. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to change everything at once. You just have to show up. Because a garden with a master, even if it's imperfect, even if it's still full of weeds, is completely different from an abandoned one. The difference between the life you have and the life you could have isn't a talent you lack. It's the presence you haven't yet given yourself. So here is my invitation. Tomorrow morning, Before you open your phone, write one single sentence. Today I am cultivating, and finish it with what is true for you. That is the first cut. And first cuts change gardens. If this video touched something inside you, write a single word in the comments. The word that summarizes what you feel right now. It could be wait, it could be hope, it could be now. Any word that is honest. Because sometimes transformation starts just like that, with a true word in a place where someone will read it. You aren't stuck. The garden can still bloom, but it needs you.